Let's dive right into this explainer, because we're looking at one of the most incredible, almost literal paradoxes in aviation history, the F-15E Strike Eagle. This is a jet that completely rewrote the rulebook on what a fighter could actually do. But to really wrap our heads around this phenomenal machine and its journey to perfection, we gotta rewind to how it all started. And that brings us to a very famous and honestly super strict design philosophy. Not a pound for air to ground. That was it. That was the uncompromising mantra of the original F-15 Eagle program back in the late 60s and 70s. The Air Force wanted a pure, unadulterated air-to-air dogfighter. They wanted to absolutely own the skies, with zero consideration and literally zero weight dedicated to ground attack missions. I mean, the engineers were essentially banned from making it a bomber. So that begs a pretty fascinating question, right? How on earth did an airframe built strictly to hunt down other planes transform into America's ultimate bomber? How did it evolve into the legendary dual-role Strike Eagle that's basically been the backbone of American tactical bombing for decades now? Let's look at Section 1, Not a Pound for Ground, Breaking the Mandate, and see how this all kicked off. Okay, picture the early 1980s. The Air Force desperately needs a deep strike interdictor to replace the aging F-111 Aardvark. So they set up a competition, pitting a modified F-15 against the really crazy-looking F-16 XL. Now, the XL had this radically redesigned cranked delta wing, which was super promising. But the F-15E ultimately took the crown. Why? Well, it boiled down to a few key things. Development costs were way lower. We're talking $270 million compared to the XL's $470 million. Plus, it had massive future growth potential. And maybe most importantly, it had twin-engine redundancy. Think about it. If you're flying deep, deep behind enemy lines, having two engines instead of one is a massive, massive safety net. Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of a Strike Eagle, Building a Beast. To turn a pure air superiority jet into a ground attack monster, well, it required a massive physical glow-up. Unlike the single-seat F-15C, the Strike Eagle had to squeeze in a backseat. This is for the Weapons Systems Officer, or WESO as they call him. Armed with 4 screens, the WESO handles all the crazy advanced air-to-ground avionics, the radar maps, the targeting pods, the whole shebang. And that leaves the pilot up front, totally free to just fly the jet and watch out for air threats. Oh, and they also strapped on those massive conformal fuel tanks, or CFTs, that hug right up against the sides of the fuselage. Now, adding a second human, all that heavy tech, and those extra fuel tanks, that requires some serious, serious muscle. Take a look at these specs. We're talking 2 Pratt & Whitney engines, churning out up to 29,000 pounds of thrust each. That is an insane thrust-to-weight ratio. It allows the jet to launch with a maximum takeoff weight of 81,000 pounds. That means it can haul massive payloads deep into enemy territory and still hit speeds over Mach 2.5. It's an absolute beast of a machine. Let's jump to Section 3, Trial by Fire, Operation Desert Storm. So the ink is barely dry on its deployment orders when the brand spanking new F-15E gets sent to dismantle Iraq's highly feared air defense network in 1991. And the reality? It was completely harrowing. Look at this timeline. On January 17th, crews are flying these pitch-black night strikes on Scud missile sites, operating in total radio silence. It was incredibly dangerous, marked by the tragic loss of an F-15E to heavy anti-aircraft artillery over Basra just 2 days later. But they adapted, they pressed on, and then, on February 14th, a crew pulls off something totally unprecedented. They dropped a GBU-10 laser-guided bomb right smack onto a moving Iraqi helicopter, in mid-air. Just an absolutely mind-blowing feat of precision. Which brings us to Section 4, Upgrading the Tech Arsenal, Demystifying the Jargon. You might be wondering, how does an airframe from the 1980s stay this lethal in the 2020s? Well, it's all about the internal systems. Starting with LANTIRN, that stands for Low Altitude Navigation and Targeting Infrared for Night. These 2 pods are exactly what let those Desert Storm pilots safely skim the Earth at low altitudes and drop precision bombs in pitch-black weather conditions. One pod uses terrain-following radar to literally keep the jet from crashing into the dirt, while the other paints the target with a laser for the guided munitions. A total game changer. Then you have the JHMCS, or Joint Helmet Mounted Cueing System. Okay, this isn't just a fancy hard hat. It's a massive force multiplier that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie. It uses a magnetic tracker to project targeting data directly onto the pilot's visor. So the crew can literally just look at a target with their naked eye and boom, the aircraft sensors and weapons follow their gaze and lock on. It hugely speeds up how fast crews can find and fix targets on the battlefield. And we gotta talk about the radar. Upgrading to the APG-82 V1 in the 2010s was monumental. This is an active electronically scanned array, or ASAR radar. Older radars had to mechanically move a dish around to scan the sky. Kind of clunky, right? But this solid-state system, it can track multiple air and ground targets almost instantaneously. And get this, from a maintenance standpoint, upgrading to this system actually boosted reliability by a factor of 20. 20! Finally, for keeping these crews alive today, there's EPAWS, the Eagle Passive/Active Warning and Survivability System. This was delivered just recently to units like the 494th Fighter Squadron over at RAF Lakenheath. It's an advanced digital electronic warfare suite that gives them 360-degree threat detection and jamming. Basically, it creates a digital shield that allows the Strike Eagle to survive in highly contested modern airspaces where older systems would just get totally overwhelmed. Let's wrap up with Section 5, returning to air, the full circle twist. Because here is where the narrative takes a massive, almost ironic turn right back to the Eagle's roots. Believe it or not, F-15Es are now flying clean, meaning without those conformal fuel tanks to maximize their air combat performance. With the pure air-to-air F-15C models retiring across the Air Force, Strike Eagles over in Europe are actually shedding the very tanks that made them bombers, just so they can step back into an air policing role. And doing this comes with some absolutely fascinating tactical trade-offs. See, with those conformal fuel tanks, sure, you get 6 critical air-to-ground weapons stations and 750 extra gallons of fuel per tank. But you also get a lot of high drag. Without them, oh man, you regain supercruise capability, maximum maneuverability, and enhanced survivability. So ditching the tanks sacrifices bombing capacity, but it literally transforms the jet back into a hyper-agile air dominance machine, ready to dogfight the best of the best. Of course, it's not a perfect swap. Stripping the tanks means you lose those 6 primary air-to-ground weapon stations. And crucially, it means you can't mount targeting pods, like Sniper or Lantern, on the intake shoulders, because those mount directly onto the tanks themselves. So squadrons are having to figure out entirely new tactical workarounds, and they'll likely need brand new certifications just to carry a targeting pod right on the belly of the aircraft. But here's the thing. This isn't just a temporary band-aid. It is directly informing the future of the Air Force. Enter the F-15EX Eagle II. This is the new Advanced Eagle variant, and right now, as it rolls right off the production line, it's being tested without those conformal fuel tanks even provisioned. These first jets are arriving at Air National Guard units right now to replace those pure air-to-air F-15Cs. And this brings us to a magic number, 12. Thanks to a new digital fly-by-wire system, the outer wings of the F-15 have finally been unlocked for carrying weapons. So an F-15EX flying completely clean without those bulky conformal tanks can act as a giant missile truck, carrying up to 12 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles. That is an unprecedented payload for dominating the skies. It's just wild. Which leaves us with a really provocative final question based on all this source material. Will the F-15EX permanently trade its bomber legacy to become the ultimate missile truck? It really makes you wonder if the 40-year evolution of the F-15 has finally come full circle, cementing its future entirely in the air-to-air arena once again. What started as not a pound for air-to-ground just might be the exact philosophy driving it into the future. What do you guys think?